Hello, I'm Tony, and today we are looking at Fault Triumph, an interesting genre mashup, free from the Epic Games Store until the 8th of December 2022. Let's talk about what genres were mixed, and how well it was baked in the development oven. It's a mix of Heroes of Might and Magic's top-down exploration RPG, with the battles being XCOM turn-based strategy fight on a much more detailed 3D environment. Like I said, it's an interesting mix, and it's one that I think works pretty well. There are 3 play modes: campaign, skirmish and multiplayer options. I'll straight up tell you I've not looked at the multiplayer part since I'm a bit of a Billy No Mates, but from what I've read it's limited to local co-op, but with up to 8 people playing. Although with that many players I can see there being a lot of waiting around since the fights can take a fair while. The campaign mode is, as you'd expect, story based. It starts with a tutorial which I would recommend checking out, as there are a few things that aren't in every tactical turn-based RPG game. The biggest ones are physics-based attacks, because pretty much everything on the battlefield is destructible, and there are plenty of abilities specifically designed to help you tear the place apart and land bits of scenery on the enemies. More on that later. You are led through a pretty humorous story, being introduced to our 4 main characters, one of each of the available classes: Paladin, Mage, Ranger and Barbarian. Each is distinct, and there's enough characterisation to get you invested enough in the characters to be interested in the events, which are kicked off by your creation of an adventuring company. More heroes are introduced as you progress. So far I've got to control some of them for certain battles, but they're not in my normal party. As you fight, your characters gain experience and thus access to new skills, or ability to improve their current ones. There's a good range available, and I'm kind of only just getting to grips with them, slowly managing to create viable builds. Trying them out in battle is the only real way to determine their effectiveness, so save often and experiment. Each class has their own list of skills, though some skills can be learnt through other means, which is part of the Heroes of Might and Magic map aspect. You also have a fort, which is in the title, in a Heroes of Might and Magic style way, though they don't produce units that you can add to an army, because you can only fight with your heroes. Instead, it generates money called Bitcoins, which might be where cryptocurrency ends up for all I know, and it allows you to build and upgrade structures, recruit new heroes, and add guild benefits. The structures give your army various bonuses, the ability to retaliate to all attacks, not just one, or movement speed, as well as being prerequisites for certain guild benefits. The bonuses that the fort gives you are different for the different factions that are available. So if you have the fort of the ogres and goblins, it gives different benefits. The guild benefits also vary between the different factions and are focused on combat bonuses, things like allowing retaliations in the first place, more action points at the start of battle, adding bonuses to your hero's attack and defense, those kind of things. These make a huge difference in a fight, which incidentally is where the currency for buying them comes from. After a fight, you're graded according to a bunch of metrics, including damage taken and physics-based kills, and are awarded an amount of renown to reinvest in guild benefits. You also move your heroes around the map, attacking monsters, picking up resources dotted around like bitcoins and magic, which are required for some of the building upgrades in your fort. Hovering over an enemy gives you a difficulty rating, which is really helpful. And what's also handy is that fights that only have half out of 5 difficulty rating can be auto-won, so you don't need to go through the lengthy battle sequence to get your experience. The non-fight encounters can award resources, experience, free potions, or options to acquire or change or remove traits. Traits are often a kiss-curse addition to your character that I've kind of steered clear from for now while I'm still learning the game, since there appear to be tons of them. Some of them aren't kiss curse. Some of them are just positive, but there's not many. Most of the time you're kind of gambling to see what happens, see what traits you'll pick up. You also have bands of enemy heroes belonging to other factions roaming around, which are likely to provide a much stronger challenge. There are also items on the map to pick up that can add a huge range of options in battle. Some add to your attack, others provide bonus actions that cost no action points, and there are no doubt more that I've not yet seen. These can be a huge boon in battle, and have often turned the tide or rounded out a build of one of my characters to just really make that build extremely effective. The fights are often pretty involved, taking place on a randomly generated 3D map, all turn-based with your characters going first, and they're all free to use any or all of their action points in any order you wish. You can swap between them at will. Typically, you'll probably not use a character's full action points before switching to another one, but rather mix and match skills and abilities to be as effective as possible. These abilities can allow you to smash scenery onto enemies, which is actually more effective than the damage done would indicate, since it reduces their action points by 2, which generally means that they can only move and won't have enough action points to perform an attack. Melee characters can kick enemies or objects, potentially hitting and incapacitating multiple enemies at once. Direct damage is also important, of course. A well-placed fireball is as useful as they always are, particularly since objects and people can catch fire and fire can spread, which is a nice touch. Kicking a barrel of explosive, for example, ruins everybody's day, yours included. Ranged characters have the option to go on Overwatch, which sets them up to fire during an enemy's move, so if any enemy walks into their field of vision, they take a shot. This is a huge part of fights, particularly against faction heroes, as attacking them automatically gives their ranged heroes Overwatch, which leaves you open to a barrage of attacks if you move out of cover. Cover is therefore a huge aspect of the game. You really should be in cover at all times, because being in the open leaves you vulnerable to becoming a pincushion, or whatever word means having lots of magic bolts chucked at you. The melee version of Overwatch is Brace, which just halves the damage from the next hit, a defensive move rather than an offensive move. Onto the skirmish mode, which is a simpler option. It creates a random map, lets you choose the number of enemies and the faction types that each one's going to be, and just lets you loose on the world. It plays exactly the same as a campaign mode, just doesn't have a driving narrative, and should be a far quicker gaming experience. It might actually be a good idea to try this out first, because the default gameplay is pretty challenging, since I found myself replaying a lot of the fights in the campaign. Two main reasons for this. First is the feature called Permadeath, which is selected on by default. This means that if a character dies in a fight, they're gone for good. This can make the first play of the game a bit of a nightmare, since the AI is smart enough to gang up on a single character. Losing your 9th level paladin with all the hard-won skills you've amassed can pretty much wreck the campaign. The developers have randomised all the encounters, so while it might be possible to reload and have a more favourable battlefield layout, you can't retry certain tactics between attempts. The second thing that makes it tricky is the randomness in the abilities. Every attack is RNG based. You can perfectly set up a devastating attack plan, only for RNG to stick its fingers up to your 90% chance to hit and okay the 12% chance shot your enemy made, and you're reloading your save. It's also not possible to estimate your percentage to hit chances until you move into position, but once you've moved into position you can't unmove that, you can't take that move back. You might find that your line of sight isn't as good as you thought it was going to be, or still seems like it should be, but you're out of luck. Sorry mate, you should have looked harder. This is something that happens less as you get used to the game and learn how to judge things a bit better, but early on it can be quite discouraging. My advice to begin with is to turn off permadeath. Any characters that die then can be rehired at the tavern, which can still be a penalty but shouldn't ruin your game. I did play Skirmish on easy mode, but it was way too easy, so I'd definitely go normal mode with no permadeath. This is a really fun, engrossing mashup that I definitely recommend to the tactical turn-based RPG fans out there. Or at least it was when I turned off permadeath. It was a bit miserable and frustrating before that. There are enough combination of skills, items and tactics that can make the choices really impactful, and so you get the fun of working out good party setups and trying them all out. As someone who likes both the turn-based tactical games and Heroes of Might and Magic, this merges them pretty successfully. Obviously, if you want a hardcore challenge, you've got your permadeath and you've got even harder modes, none of which I'll be trying out, but it's good to have the option. This is a definite recommend from me and it's staying installed. Okay, that's all from me for this one, so thanks for watching and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.